Thank you. Thank you very much for joining, and hello everybody. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Miroslav Pitlanic, and I am a volunteer in SPP DACH chapter supporting this webinar, and I will be moderating and walking you through this. This webinar is called Sustainability and Procurement from Ambition to Action. It's very relevant because this has been with me all my career in procurement. A lot of companies, suppliers have the ambition to do something, but there is a struggle to do the first step. There is a struggle there might be a struggle to decide which way to go. And that's why this topic is to me still really relevant. And we are looking forward, and I'm looking forward as well, to hear from our speakers, lovely speakers, to hear their views, their thoughts on how yourselves and your organizations could take it to the next level. So those leaders and guests are from different areas, from a social procurement and social enterprises, and also from the corporates. Who are bringing the experiences and relevant thoughts on this topic, and I hope we all will be surely enjoy it. At the end of the session, we have Q&A. So if you have any question, please keep your question for the end or drop it into chat, and we will get back to those questions at the end of the session. With that, I'm very pleased to welcome here Charlie Wigglesworth, who is Managing Director at Telos and a Deputy CEO of Social Enterprise UK. He's been at the forefront of driving social procurement forward in the UK and beyond. He recently wrote a piece for the World Economic Forum reflecting on how businesses can create measurable social impact through their supply chains, not as an add-on, but as a part of how they buy. So, Charlie, over to you.
Thanks, Miroslav. Good afternoon, everybody. Great to be here on the call. I'm going to mainly today run through the report that Miroslav mentioned there on the state of social procurement that we did with the World Economic Forum, which I think gives a really helpful overview on some of the business drivers around why this topic is growing in interest and popularity, and some of the practical opportunities and next steps for procurement leaders and business leaders to engage more with the topic. If you go to the next slide, please, Miroslav. So just to start off with, just in terms of definitions. So a social enterprise, and when we talk about social procurement, we're talking principally about buying from social enterprises. They are businesses that trade for a social and environmental purpose. So we're talking about organizations that are trading businesses, like the four you can see here, in different areas of B2B spend. But that money is going back into a social and environmental purpose, and that is the core of why they exist and what they exist to do. So if we go to the next slide, you can see that each of those businesses, the coffee business exists to end homelessness. The office supplies business, exists to create microfinance in Africa and Bangladesh. The IT recycling business exists not just for an environmental purpose in terms of CO2 reduction, but also to create jobs for people with disabilities. And the software testing business also kind of creating jobs for those on the neurodivergent spectrum. And if we go to the next slide, these businesses are now globally major economic players. So the World Economic Forum did some research that launched at Davos 2 years ago, looking at the global scale of the sector, where and how it was growing and how it was developing around the world. And that led the forum to start to think about some of the specific drivers of what is needed to kind of grow and develop the sector and how to take it forward. And that led them, if we go to the next slide, to the report that I'm mainly going to be talking about today. So this is the State of Social Procurement 2025. This launched this year at Davos, and Telos, the organization I represent, was one of the partners alongside SAP and Prewave on the development of this report. It's built on the expertise of 18 global organizations, so mapping markets around the world, but also kind of direct data on, we took 150,000 data points through Prewave, or an Austrian-based data provision company, to look at global supply chain events and some of the drivers of what's leading to kind of more interest and more engagement around social procurement. And also through working with the Lex Mundi Foundation, we did kind of fresh legal analysis on law firms in 39 jurisdictions around the world. So really exploring the kind of push and pull drivers of kind of what is leading to more engagement from businesses in this agenda all over the world, and some really interesting insights and things to deep dive into. Obviously, I'll share the link to the report afterwards, but I'm just going to pick out a few things of interest over the next few slides in the next 10 minutes or so. Next slide, please. So in summary, I guess what the report found is firstly kind of these are the kind of 4 key business drivers as to why procurement leaders are increasingly looking at social procurement as a solution. The first was from those 150,000 data points, is around kind of supply chain events, and actually finding that social issues are more likely than environmental concerns to drive those around the world. So looking at social responses to that is increasingly important. The second was around legislative change. And we've talked already about the fact that different jurisdictions around the world, and we looked at 39 different jurisdictions, and particularly European legislation, is really driving a different approach to looking at corporate impact, not just in direct activities, but in the supply chain as well. A shift in terms of procurement leadership, so actually procurement as a function and kind of culturally looking differently at its role and what it exists to do. And finally, the kind of the push factor of the slide previously around the kind of growth and development of social enterprise. Obviously, kind of as more capable suppliers and opportunities come online, working with these partners, engaging with these businesses becomes more attractive. Just to drill down on a couple of those in a bit more detail. So the next slide looks at the legislative factors specifically. And here, obviously, particularly focused on kind of CSDDD and the European framework. And the report goes into a lot of detail on how this has been interpreted and applied globally in different jurisdictions, but also how that is complemented by other related activity, not just on kind of biodiversity and deforestation, but also around kind of looking more broadly at kind of sustainable economic activities, things like the European economic strategy, which has social enterprise as a key pillar of that. Lots of an increasing focus really around both seeing the social economy as an important partner in creating the change that needs to happen, and also putting increased pressure on supply chains to be part of the solution rather than being part of the problem. The second area to reference is this real shift in next slide, Miroslav, is the kind of that change in procurement culture. And two of the things that we looked at in the report, one is that when we're looking at the opportunity from a procurement perspective, businesses increasingly recognizing, I think, that supply chains has an incredible power and is an incredible lever for economic growth and change. So on the left there, you can see, this is based on FTSE 100s, but the average FTSE 100 has a CSR spend of 10 million, but a procurement budget of 4 billion. So in terms of where the opportunity for change and impact is coming from, procurement is now front and center of looking at the footprint of a business. And the second thing I think is more cultural, and this is just referenced by the Deloitte CPO survey from 2023, which was titled Orchestrators of Value, is about the kind of repositioning and thinking of by procurement leadership and by those outside of the function as well as being a much more important kind of value creator within the business. And you can see that in some of the responses within the survey. So ESG, which was the 7th most important factor in 2021, was 2nd in 2023. So going right up the pecking order in terms of priorities. And internally, when we think about why businesses might engage and what might make them want to look at it, the top internal priority was talent. Thinking about how do we engage with the next generation? How do we look at aligning the values of people in procurement with the values that procurement enacts through its day-to-day operations? Clearly, social procurement is a great opportunity to do that. The next slide just talks about, again, going back to the report here. This identified some of the reasons around acceleration. So there are 13 case studies in the report. I'm not going to go through them all in detail now. From every continent around the world, just looking at how we're seeing a real acceleration in activity, not just from those kind of broader strategic push and pull factors, but also practically from a growth in social procurement intermediaries, so people that can connect businesses with opportunities in this space, the kind of key role of corporate enablers, the increased capacity and recognition of this space, and much more support and engagement from government. We've mentioned the European Commission already, but this is governments across the world, in Malaysia, across Southeast Asia, Australia, many other examples demonstrated in the survey and that you can dig into the detail of. If we go to the next slide, just bringing that a bit closer to home in terms of kind of practical examples of how social enterprises are delivering. So a number of case studies that were included in the European section of the report, looking at how big businesses are partnering with social enterprises to deliver both incredible social and environmental impact through what they're doing, both creating a kind of different dynamic within their supply chains, within their purchasing systems, but also a real point of difference in terms of that holistic approach to ESG. So looking not just at environmental factors or net zero in isolation, but also understanding how that links to social opportunities. So just to take the example of AFB and Siemens, not just is that, saving a huge amount of water, masses of tons of CO2, but it's also creating 14 jobs for people with disabilities within that supply chain. So really compelling, really dynamic and narrative examples. And this is not just happening at tier one. So another case study from the UK example on the next slide is looking at how this can happen at indirect level as well. So Zurich Insurance working with CBRE, their FM provider, to target and drive greater social procurement spend at tier two. So also looking at how this can be enacted and created further down the supply chain in order to create more opportunities, more innovation and more engagement, and doing that in partnership as a way of driving more of that activity. And just finally, in terms of the, just next slide, Miro, just when thinking about how all this comes together. So as Social Enterprise UK, as a kind of UK organisation that I work for, this is the impact of our Bi-Social Corporate Challenge programme over the past 9 years, working with 35 businesses and kind of aggregating all of the spend and impact of what's done through the programme. And you can see there not just kind of significant spend with providers, but also, we've created nearly 6,000 jobs for those furthest from the labour market. We've seen nearly £60 million, reinvested into those businesses, into those social purposes and social missions. And all of that has been done at 95% delivering at higher quality or price, higher quality or equal quality to mainstream providers, and 92% equal or better on price. So this can be done in a sustainable and growable way that is really creating that triple bottom line impact across ESG, and in a way that is really growing and developing across the European market and around the world. So final slide, Miro, is just a few resources and places to find out more. So there's a link there to the report that I've been talking to, also to the UK Corporate Challenge, and to Telos as well, which is our kind of EMEA program, looking at how we work across Europe, focusing a lot on the DACH region, Iberia, Italy, and France at the moment. I'll stop there, hand back to Miroslav, and look forward to Q&A later.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you very much. Very interesting numbers. I just have one quick question to you. I noticed 46% rise in spending with social enterprises. That sounds like a huge number. How would you describe the reality? Is this rise still so positive as it looks on a number? Does it have a increasing trend? would you say you're happy with the situation? How do you see it from your point of view?
I think, and the report looks at this around the world, that there are certain markets where there is particular levels of maturity around this activity, and the UK is one. And what you see as you build that maturity is it starts to snowball and build its own momentum. And I think we're definitely getting to a point where spend is rising, kind of not quite exponentially, but increasing significantly year on year, because there is a critical mass of suppliers and buyers engaging with this topic. I think when I look at what we're looking to do through Telos across EMEA and other programs around the world, they're slightly earlier stage in that development. So there's amazing opportunities out there. There's fantastic suppliers to engage with, work to do, but we're not yet at the stage, I think, where we'll start to see that kind of exponential growth. I think we need to build the kind of foundational blocks of that. But certainly it's very encouraging to see where that can get to in markets like the UK, as examples of where the DACH region, for example, or those engaged in Europe could see their programs getting to over time.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Charlie. And with that, I would like to welcome, and I'm pleased to welcome our second speaker, Elena Heckmann. Elena is Procurement Supplier Impact and Sustainability Manager at Accenture. She's worked on embedding sustainability into the heart of procurement operations in large organizations, translating high-level ambitions into practical day-to-day decisions that the buyers and suppliers can act on. So Elena is here to share some of those real-world insights with us and how they do the things at Accenture. So Elena, thank you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. As introduced, my name is Elena Heckmann, and I'm part of Accenture's Supply Impact and Sustainability Program, where I lead our supplier sustainability strategy and integration, as well as our supplier decarbonization programs. And based in Hamburg, I also work with our EMEA and DACH procurement leads to bring our global supply impact and sustainability ambitions to life in the region specifically. I joined Accenture in 2018, initially as a sustainability strategy consultant, and then later transitioned into the current role to leverage our global scale and procurement spend to create more sustainable and inclusive supply chains, globally and locally. I do have a background in international development, so the work that Charlie was just talking about is very close to my heart, trying to figure out how to create real impact for the environment and society around us. Next slide, please. In Germany, I frequently get puzzled looks when I say that I work for Accenture, which is not so known locally. I don't know all the attendants on this call, so let me just briefly say a couple of things about who Accenture is and what we do. Accenture is a global professional services company that helps the world's leading businesses, governments, and other organizations build their digital core, optimize their operations, and accelerate revenue growth. And we do so across different client delivery groups around strategy and consulting, technology, operations, then Accenture Song, which is mostly creative agencies, Industry X, and other business groups. And I find it difficult to believe, but we are a gigantic organization with close to 800,000 employees worldwide and more than 200 offices. We are essentially a people business, and we help our clients advance their environmental, social, and governance goals by connecting sustainability to their transformations. And we also do that internally in the way we operate our business and have strong commitments to the environment, ethics, and human rights, and the intentions and objectives we have to create value in the communities around us. My team is embedded in our global procurement organization, so a big matrix organization represented in all the countries that we work in. And we have 5 major spend areas, indirect spend areas across technology, then what we call external talent or contractors, so mostly for client delivery, travel mobility, so your flights and hotel nights and so on, workplace offices, and corporate services, as well as some indirect spend categories for Industry X. And to what Charlie earlier said, we do have a large global presence and scale, and we moved $9 billion US of global spend in fiscal 24. So that's a lot of money that we spend in these categories. And through our supply impact and sustainability program, which is a key strategic component and priority of our global procurement team, and also our corporate sustainability agenda, we help shape what responsible buying looks like for us on a strategic level, and how we can use the opportunities in front of us to encourage this economic growth and social equity through inclusive procurement practices. Next slide, please. So our team does work around 4 main pillars. Supply chain decarbonization in support of our SBTi approved net zero 2040 targets, where we have signed up to reduce our supply chain emissions by 90% compared to 2019. Human rights, conflict, minerals compliance, then social equity through inclusive procurement practices, and support of small, medium-sized enterprises, as well as social enterprises and inclusive businesses from a variety of background. And last piece is we work on accessible procurement to make sure that Accenture as an employer also offers an accessible work environment whenever our employees interact with any of the technology products and services that we work with. We set out our expectations of suppliers and our supplier standards of conduct that all the suppliers need to sign up to, and that reflect our code of business ethics. And we have been on this journey of inclusive and sustainable procurement for quite some years. So initially starting in 2006, more around the social procurement agenda, and responding to public and private sector clients' expectations, regulatory requirements in different countries, be it social value expectations in the UK, spent requirements in the US in the past, but also in South Africa, and taking it from there. But then also working very closely with our sustainability strategy colleagues on client side to really work on a leading role and in the commitments and efforts that we take to drive this forward. So we can dive a little bit into these different sections and what we do there. So in the environment space, we initially started engaging a set of key suppliers via the CDP program, initially in 2010, to encourage them to set emission reduction targets and initiatives. By now, close to 90% of the suppliers that we have engaged in this program have set such targets, which I believe is a great achievement. And with the Sustainable Procurement Hub that we have internally built on top of our supplier onboarding platform called True Supplier Marketplace, we're now able to go beyond that and gather more supplier data directly from the suppliers that we work with, not only for our Scope 3 carbon accounting, so kind of retrospective, but really to drive supplier selection and engagement going forward. All work in progress, but this is really ramping up, and I can really see how this data that we're getting and the insights that we're able to derive from that are helping us with really embedding that into our procurement processes. In support of the suppliers who may not be so advanced on their decarbonization journey just yet, mindful that we work with very big suppliers, but we also have inclusive procurement agenda, so trying to balance the expectations and the support opportunities. We are also working with our strategy and consulting colleagues to support suppliers through our supplier target setting program. So really offering at the moment free of charge, and then going forward in a cost sharing model, supporting suppliers to baseline their own emissions, develop suitable targets for themselves, and take them through that data collection and reporting process, which has been very well received by the participants so far, and we're scaling it up to 50 at the moment. In addition, we've been running supply development programs in, at the moment, 7 countries for many years, where we support small businesses as well as companies owned by people from a variety of backgrounds and experiences to gain opportunities to participate in our supply chain. So really helping businesses to, I guess, meet all the expectations of a big corporate like Accenture when it comes to the service quality and also the delivery expectations. And in addition, we have been working with a number of partnership organizations to identify inclusive suppliers and social enterprises in the different markets that we can then integrate into a sourcing panel and let them compete on any kind of work opportunities that might arise. And we do so in 22 countries. In Germany at the moment, we work with WeConnect International and ESDP, and hopefully soon also Telos, to identify suppliers, connect them to our procurement leads, connect them to the different category owners in the markets, and for them to take that to the business owners internally and also for our client delivery work. And that's where I guess the challenges lie, that we have a global program. Some of those things are very global, emissions are global, and our efforts to focus on the most material suppliers are global. But when it comes to engaging much smaller suppliers on local or regional opportunities, it's very much up to the local procurement needs and their connections with the business to use those opportunities and source locally and with those suppliers that support social causes. One example that I can pull out is actually a connection that we have made in a recent event that we participated in. So, for example, here in the DACH region, we're now working with Mondays, a women-owned business from Switzerland that provides sustainable menstrual health products to all our Accenture offices in the DACH region, which is a great support for women in workplace that we're very grateful for. Another example in the UK was My Mind, a small company in England that we work with to develop a well-being training, and we also use this company and this program internally at Accenture, but also for clients. And that's really where I see the biggest opportunities whenever we don't just use suppliers for internal delivery, but really taking them to clients and really growing together has been the best success factor for us when driving especially social procurement. So what are the next steps? I've been working in this role for a while, but I certainly believe it's not about individual initiatives and support programs here and there. It's really about embedding all these different data points and all these great suppliers that we have been working with, partnerships and so on, into the normal procurement processes. And that's what we continue to work on, to make information about supplier sustainability performance, but also where they support social and environmental courses, part of our processes, technologies, and people training to really make sure it's understood at global level, but also very much on local level. I said before, using supplier data that we're now capturing via our True Supplier Marketplace as part of any standard RFX or onboarding process, using those scores for supplier evaluations, developing supplier-specific improvement recommendations that we can draw from these insights, integrating those scores and flagging certain suppliers in scorecards and so on, is a key piece that we continue working on, but that I believe is critical for really bringing this to life and increasing spend with suppliers that do better and that support social and environmental sustainability. So I would pause here for now, so we have enough time for questions and answers, if you don't mind, and happy to discuss.
Yes, excellent. Thank you very much, Elena. It was very interesting to hear a lot of great things what you have done and accomplished together with Accenture. I would like now to ask our audience if there is any questions from them. If there is no question at the moment, I have a question to Elena, and you talk about embedding sustainability in your company in the everyday decisions which you make. What's been the most effective tool or lever for in your organizations for you? Are those tools, trainings, or leadership in order to make the next steps? Perhaps it is a first step, or perhaps it is just another step, depending on where the organization is. But what was the most important for you?
Talking. I would say joining individual meetings of different procurement stakeholders that exist in different levels, be it at category level, be it at management level, be it the local EMEA procurement teams and so on, so that procurement teams feel like their decisions play a critical role. The recommendations they make to the business stakeholders are critical. They have a lot of leverage to involve small, medium-sized enterprises into the procurement panel, or pick out or flag those suppliers that are performing more sustainably than others when presenting those recommendations. They speak to our internal business stakeholders, we call them. They also speak to the suppliers when conveying the message of what Accenture is looking out for. So I see them as critical. I must admit, every transformation that comes with change in people and responsibilities does throw us back a little bit on that. So it's a matter of, yes, of course, always trainings, pointing people to where they can find the information and so on and so forth. But I'm afraid it's also about the individuals and talking to them as often as possible. They might say that it's something different, but that's kind of the drop on the stone that I feel like has worked most, where it has worked really well.
Excellent. It's such a great insight. Thank you very much, Elena. And we have a couple of questions in the chat. So the first question is, how do you balance social versus supplier diversity impact?
So there is a different focus, or there has been a different focus in different countries that we operate in. A lot of that, unfortunately, driven by some decisions in the US at the moment, are a little bit under scrutiny. For quite some time now, we have been looking at quite a broad group of suppliers when thinking about diversity. So it's looking at businesses operated by women, so owned, managed, and operated by women, by veterans, by different ethnicity groups, depending on what the focus in that market is. But also looking at small businesses and small and medium-sized enterprises that usually create a lot more impact locally where they're embedded in. And that's also why I believe working with social enterprises that have this objective embedded in how they run their business, either by who they employ, which is very reflective of how Accenture runs or its own talent strategy, or the impact that they create around them, is really adds to the picture. Because essentially, one way or the other, it's about creating equity and economic growth for the communities where those businesses operate in. So I would take a rather broad perspective on that, mindful that we do obviously respect the local expectations, or often driven by public procurement in the different countries as well.
I guess it's a complex topic, but to make it even more complex, this comes the second question, very interesting question, and this may even be for Charlie as well. How do you extend this program in developing economies like India?
I'm sure Elena will have. I know Accenture have a big presence in India, but certainly from the to go back to the report we did for the forum at the start of the year, that there's a specific profile on India, and there's an organization there called SATVA, who are a very capable advisory business who've done a lot of work in the space. I think the primary context in most developing countries is obviously the economic piece, but as we've explained, social enterprise and social procurement plays very well into that from an economic growth and kind of social empowerment perspective. So in India, for example, there is kind of the focus is more on kind of broader kind of small and medium enterprise engagement rather than kind of social enterprise specifically. But having said that, within that, there is obviously a lot of social enterprise activity, a lot of suppliers on the ground, and therefore a lot of focus on developing and building that. And you can see that also in places like South America, Bangladesh, Philippines, Taiwan. There's other examples in the case studies of how what tends to be a kind of more broad-based economic development approach can see kind of social procurement as a key driver within it, particularly given some of the other dynamics that are in play around equity and engagement and inclusion and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe I can add to that.
Yes.
So we do have 3 programs in emerging economies. So one is India, where we have our supply development program, where a set of small enterprises are supported through mentoring and training programs run by procurement senior managers and managing directors. The same, and I wouldn't be able to tell you from the top of my head how many businesses have already graduated those programs, but quite successful program in South Africa as well. And a new program now that just started in Brazil. Accenture has a lot of operations employees based in India, the Philippines, and now also increasingly in Argentina and Brazil. So that also influences where our procurement spend takes place and the opportunities that we have to involve local suppliers for those big operations in the different countries that we work in.
Excellent. I would like to ask audience if there is any other question at the moment. If not, I have one more, probably last question.
There's a couple that have come through just now. Or if you want to, there's one on the best drivers to convince resident business leaders. I like the framing of that, Christoph. I think it's got to come back to the why for local business leaders, I think, which will differ, obviously. Some of the ones that we've seen as, well, the first thing to say is I think social businesses fit well into lots of different whys. That might be about kind of talent and kind of internal talent and team engagement, as I mentioned before, in terms of future jobs and roles in procurement chains. That might be about linking to the broader business case for the organization in terms of business winning, responding to legislation, and so on. Or that might be around a wider strategic imperative. So if, the CEO of the business is standing up and talking about social mobility all the time, and he or she might mean that in the context of who works for the organization, actually, procurement and supply chains can mirror that in how they think about what they can deliver through the supply chain to also create social mobility and opportunity. And, social enterprise is a route to doing that as well. So I think aligning and tying into the business case at a strategic level or a procurement specific level, kind of a departmental level, I guess, are kind of key to driving that and understanding how to plug in what the social business, social enterprise space can offer to align with that is a lot of the things that we would focus on when looking at that.
Is there any more question? Charlie, you have mentioned, I'm not able to see it at the moment, I'm afraid.
Yeah, so there's one more question on how to measure success of such programs. That's always a tricky one, right? Like, where do you measure? I always think of output, outcome, impact, if you want. So ultimately, it's about increasing the impact, which is a more difficult thing to measure on company side. We used to capture the number of graduates from our programs, which I find interesting as a delivery KPI, but not really telling that much. What I am specifically interested in is to also look at how often were we able to utilize certain suppliers that we have supported. So what were the procurement opportunities internally, but also in our case for client delivery, where a supplier was suitable to work with us. And then obviously you can also capture the spend with certain suppliers, which is very different looking at the different market units that we work in, right? We will never be able to compare the German spend with a handful of SME inclusive suppliers to what we, for example, had in South Africa or the UK or the US, for example, where some of those programs are a lot more established, might be changing, but historically. So yeah, I find it very interesting to look at how many opportunities and how much spend were we able to utilize that supplier for, and really then obviously beyond that also use qualitative feedback from the suppliers, how they benefited from our programs. For example, the supply chain decarbonization program that I was talking about, how were they able to position themselves also with other companies through the support that we have given them. Something I find valuable.
Thank you very much. We are nearly run out of time for today, so I would like to thank Elena and Charlie very much for the time and a contribution. It was a great pleasure to hear all the insights from your work, what you do, and also I would like to thank the audience for the time, for being with us, for great questions, very relevant to the topic. I just would like to mention at the end that the session is recorded and will be distributed through SPP, LinkedIn, and other channels for you to view again or for others to view. And finally, if you haven't done and haven't joined the community, you can still do it via spp.earth. You can sign the pledge and support sustainable procurement activities, what we do. You can join SPP DACH chapter as well on LinkedIn and see what we do, what the region is doing, and also we have planned some other events like this one for the future. So just to get information about what's coming up and if this is beneficial for you. So I hope this session was beneficial for the audience. I hope you can take some of it to your personal lives or in the organizations and see how you can implement it potentially. So thank you again, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.